Paradise is exactly like where you are right now, only much, much better. Saw this guy in a train, and they seem to have gotten stuck in one of those abstract chances, and he was going, and Fred said, I think he's in some kind of pain. I think it's a pain cry. And I said, pain cry? Then language is a virus. Language, it's a virus. Language, it's a virus. Well, I was talking to a friend, and I was saying, I wanted you. And I was looking for you, but I couldn't find you. I couldn't find you. And he said, hey, you talking to me? Or are you just practicing for one of those performances of yours? Hot language, it's a virus. Language, it's a virus. He said, I had to write that letter to your mother, and I had to tell the judge that it was you, and I had to sell the car and go to Florida because that's just my way of saying
that I love you.
Had to call you at the crack of dawn and list the times that I've been wrong. That's just my way of saying that I'm sorry. It's a job. Sorry. Language, it's a virus. Is exactly like where you are right now, only much better. It's hard to think of how to start to talk about the movie because it's been a year and a half making this movie, Home of the Brave, and there's so much to say about it. We started thinking about making a movie around the time of the last tour, which was a tour that was based on a record, Mr. Heartbreak. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice to make a movie of this concert? I really like this thing, and it's so sad when performances disappear. My work is so temporary. It really is hard to put it in a form that stays around because records don't really do it. Records are the music, and the performances are mixtures of pictures and action and sound and strange-looking instruments and animation, a lot of different things, and it's difficult to find a way to keep them. I found it really satisfying to do this 5-record set, United States Live, because these things get lost. So we were going to shoot this movie on the tour. That was the first idea. Bob Regier came up with this idea. Bob Regier came up with a lot of ideas. He was the guy that I worked with at Warner Brothers. He came up with the idea to record United States Live, and when he saw what we were doing with the Mr. Heartbreak concert tour, he said, you should make a movie. What Fassbinder film is it? The one-armed man comes into the flower shop and says, what flower expresses days go by? And they just keep going by endlessly, pulling you into the future. Days go by, endlessly pulling you into the future. And the florist says, white lily. We were actually going to bring cameras into theaters and try to shoot this show live. And this was so preposterous. So we finally said, okay, well, listen, let's wait till after the tour's over and then, maybe shoot it later. I didn't think it would ever be done. So when we got back from that tour, I did love the idea of making a movie. So I had written something that we were going to try to shoot in Japan. And I had a lot of meetings about it. And then at the same time, I began working with a manager. I've never worked with a manager before. And the first thing Elliot said to me was, you've never made a feature-length film before. And how about if you start with something a little simpler, a simple concert film? Those words have come back to haunt me. They've been in 3D and neon and everything else in my dreams. Simple concert film. There may be such a thing, but this isn't it. I thought, okay, we'll round up all these people again and try to make something that will be not so much a documentary of a show, but something different. And then we began to call it something like kind of a concert film. And what makes this not a simple or kind of concert film is that there's so many other things happening in these performances. There are lots of films, and it really is a trick to film. And to really get its sparkle and its brightness and its liveliness onto another piece of film. Because in these concerts, they're very much involved with the images that are behind them. The whole piece is designed to be a kind of dialogue between these elements: action, picture, and sound. So the things that make it not a concert film are really that images are very important and that language is very important.
Language, it's a virus. Language, it's a virus. Well, I dreamed there was an island that rose up from the sea, and everybody on the island was somebody from TV. And there was a beautiful view, but nobody could see, 'cause everybody on the island was saying, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me, why? Because they all lived on an island that rose up from the sea, and everybody on the island was somebody from TV. And there was a beautiful view, but nobody could see, 'cause everybody on the island was screaming, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. Paradise is exactly right where you are right now, only much, much better.
There are a lot of questions in this movie, built right in. Why these mountains? Why this sky? Que es más macho? What Fassbinder film is it? The title of the movie is a question. I have to say that I'm really proud to be a citizen in a country that has a question as the last sentence in their national anthem. I mean, I did not put ... home of the brave ? But I think it's amazing that the last section is, so, is the flag still there? Do you see it? Is it still there? This was one of the first concerts that I was really able to get away from a keyboard by remoting things to the violin. A lot of the sounds are played on violin, synclavier sounds, because this is an instrument that can do sort of what the keyboard can do. Now, the synclavier keyboard has a sampling function that allows you to play birds, frogs, everything on the keyboard. And a design team from Synclavier worked with me on sending those signals, those digital signals, to a violin. So you see something like in Late Show, I'm playing the violin and you hear William Burroughs' voice coming out, listen, listen. So that's what's going on. And what was going on for me as a musician was finally to get out from behind keyboards, which to me is like driving a car. You know, you're behind this dashboard and you've got pedals, the gas and the brakes, and it's such a barrier. And I love the violin because it's a handheld instrument, something you hold and you can walk around with it, and it's just the right scale. It's like a pet.
Listen to my heartbeat. Sun's going down like a big bald head, disappearing behind the boulevard. It's dark as night. It's dark as night. Tonight.
I
right now. Could I take a message? Hey, keep it sunny. Long time no see.
I met William Burroughs at the Nova Convention in '78. This was a 3-day celebration of his work, and a lot of people were there. Patti Smith was playing the clarinet, John Cage was dancing, Frank Zappa was reading the talking asshole part of Naked Lunch, Phil Glass was playing, Susan Sontag was talking. It was lots and lots of people who love and admire Burroughs' work were there. One of the guests was supposed to be Keith Richards, who the promoters knew a week ahead of time was not going to show. So the night of this big event, there was notice, but the doors were flung wide open, and on the back side of this door, in pencil, on a piece of notebook paper, said, Keith Richards will not be appearing tonight. So meanwhile, all these kids are storming, and Keith! Phil Glass is playing the organ, and they're going, get the organ player off, we want Keith. You know, Patti Smith even can't calm him down playing clarinet. Frank Zappa, not enough. Then this guy walks on stage, pork pie hat, briefcase, sits down at a desk and goes, good evening. And he starts talking about drugs, sex, alienation in a way that's completely riveting. He's talking about things that these kids thought they invented, and they're hearing this old codger talking about them in ways that just are so fresh and crazy. And that night, a lot of people learned about this writer and this sensibility that's been around, really. He started talking in the 50s when people were talking about PTAs and how nice their lawns looked. And here was this guy going, listen to this. You know, this guy is so powerful. I also wanted him to be in the movie because he's old. And I admire someone who's had the stamina to have a long creative life like that and still be producing, still be making wonderful things.
You know, I can see 2 tiny pictures, and there's one in each of your eyes. And they're doing everything I do. Every time I light a cigarette, they light up theirs. I take a drink, and I look in, and they're drinking too. It's driving me crazy. It's driving me nuts.
There's a plateau in the middle of the film, which you reach, and after a lot of hopping around at the beginning, and this plateau begins with something called Bug Story, and continues in a very smooth way through Kokoku. It's a series of images that end in a kind of rotation, in a kind of turmoil. The film itself was shot to reflect those different kinds of spaces, so that camera operators were, I talked to them about shooting a section like Kokoku, and I said, listen, slide. You're a bunraku player, and your camera is your puppet. Just like in bunraku, when the puppeteer is under a piece of black material, working the toenails and fingernails of his little creature, or it's some World War II situation too, of a GI with a creeping along behind his bush. It's not fooling anybody, but it is a way of moving that's sneaky. In terms of the operator's style in Kokoku, it was a sneaky glide. It was stay parallel to the plane, and that is the projected image, which is a very, very flat surface. So you feel a very highly stylized camera motion in that song. And then the motion out of that is into a kind of an eddy that is radar, which is a something I found in New Jersey. Shot this thing out near the airport. It's one of the few radars that's still exposed. Most of them are put away and secreted. But this thing just turns around and around and around, looking, turning around. So you begin to, this is the point in the movie where you begin to lose your orientation to this flat plane, and you're caught in this rotation. The next song, which is Gravity's Angel, continues that theme, so that the camera moves in that song were all about disorientation. Any concert film is shot in a very small area. It's like a backyard. It's no bigger than, a big backyard. So to pull as much action out of that space as possible is really the trick. So in Gravity's Angel, the instructions were constantly pan to black, constantly move away from your subject, fall away, go to a void. And so you begin in that song to feel that, of always getting lost in this darkness and being disoriented. So coming out of this dizziness is just a story, and it's through language that you are pulled back into a movie that is, again, on a concert stage. This film is very much about storytelling.
Let's see. It was on an island, and there was this snake, and this snake had legs, and he could walk all around the island. Yes, that's true. A snake with legs. And the man and the woman were very smart, but they were happy as clams. Yes. Then one evening, the snake was walking about in the garden, and he was talking to himself. And he saw the woman, and they started to talk. And they became very good friends. And the woman liked the snake very much, because when he talked, he made little noises with his tongue, and his long tongue was like licking about his lip, little fire inside his mouth. And the flame would come dancing out of his mouth very much. And after that, she was bored with the man, because no matter what happened, he was always saying. Yes. What was he saying?
In the United States, the performance series that I finished in 1983, I was very concerned that I disappear into the shadows. I dressed pretty much like a kind of funeral director in a way, all black, so that I could slip around and comment on things. My job, I always felt, was a kind of narrator, and not someone who would hop out and do a follow spot and go, hey, Previous to that, in other performances, I had decided I was going to be a kind of bulge in the screen, so I would always wear white and stand in front of the film and blend in. In Home of the Brave, I got an awful lot of complaints from lighting designers about disappearing into the shadows. So I said, okay, well, wear something a little peppier. One of the things that people have remarked on who've seen this film is they go, now what about that dress? Now this is a chain metal dress that weighed about 70 pounds that I wore in Longdemoor. I could hardly hoist myself up onto this platform to walk back and forth and tell the story. So I had to wear sneakers too, if I had worn heels, which you really should wear with a dress like that, I would have been pile driving the spikes into the beam and just completely destroying this thing. The song, Longdemoor, is of course about a woman and a snake, so I tried to be both narrators in that song. The gloves were supposedly the head and tail of this long snake who keeps slithering around. Unfortunately, the thing that you saw more than that was the dress that was in between the two snake halves, which was kind of hard to miss. It was like I felt that since this was a story, of course, about the Garden of Eden, that, I mean, this is a woman's story if there ever was one. I mean, she initiated this action. Adam really just kind of stood around, really. And so I figured since she was the main person in that story, she should tell it. So that's why I departed from my usual, as they say, androgynous look to wear something more appropriate to that story. Your dreams, but mine are sort of hackneyed. Same thing night after night, just repetitive. And the color is really bad, and the themes are just infantile. And you always get what you want, and that's just not the way life is. There's a lot of animation in this movie. And it's not just happening on the screen. It's really built into a lot of things. For example, something called drum dance. Now this is a suit that has drum sensors built into it, so that when you bang on your heart, you activate a kick drum. and when you bang on your knee, you activate a snare, and there's hand claps in your hand with, just tapping on these sensors. And it came about because I was trying to fix a little drum machine that I had, a real cheesy little thing, taking it apart. I couldn't put it back together, so all of the sensors are like all over the floor, and I'm going, hey, these still work. Put them in the suit. This would work just fine. Now, the thing that's very satisfying about something like that is that usually when you pound on your head, it doesn't make that much of a sound. It may inside, but nobody else really hears it quite that loud. This is animation, making something about the body larger than it is, or something about anything. I mean, it's a question of scale. I mean, another simple example is the lens that I used in Talk Normal, which is a little Fresnel lens that I got from Edmund Scientific. Put some lights behind it, and it enlarges your head considerably. It really was very geeky looking. But then so is the song. The song was pretty geeky. Animation then is, I think, a real clue to what a lot of this film is about. It's about making things bigger or smaller. And of course, you can do that in the most direct way by just doing close-ups in a movie, but that's not really what I'm talking about. I'm really talking about the house a child draws, and the way the doorknob is 2 feet wide. The reason it is kids know that's how you get in. So that's what you're going to make the biggest thing of drawing.
I came home today and both our cars were gone, and there were all these new pink flamingos arranged in star patterns all over the lawn. And then I went into the kitchen, and it looked like a tornado had hit. And then I realized I was in the wrong house. Last night I had that dream again. I dreamed I had to take a test in a Dairy Queen on another planet. And in this dream I looked around, and there was this woman. She was making it all up. She was writing it all down. And she was laughing. She was laughing her head off. And I said, hey! Give me that pen. I turned a corner in Soho today, and someone looked right at me and said, oh no, another Laurie Anderson clone. And I said, look at me, 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 look at me. Look at me. Look at me. Look at me. Look at me.
There's a lot of dancing in the movie, and this dancing really began as hand signals to technicians. This is how I started doing this stuff. It always hand cues, and sometimes if those weren't available, foot cues to a tape op or to the house mixer or to a monitor mixer, going more, less, or stop, go, and or can you see me, or and that's how they really began. It was a kind of sign language. And the second function of this primitive dancing was really a way to count the music, and it was a kind of conducting, really, and not necessarily squaring it off like in 0 and 1. You see that kind of conducting at the beginning of the movie, but you see it again in a song like Smoke Rings, which begins with a dance that was absolutely about trying to find one in the music, and trying to find that double tom downbeat, dong, dong, was, when I was writing the drum part, not easy for me to do.
Stand by. You're on the air. Buenas noches, señores y señoras. Bienvenidos. La primera pregunta es: ¿qué es más macho? Pineapple or knife?
Well, let's see. My guess is that pineapple is more macho than a knife.
Sí, correcto. Pineapple es más macho que knife. La segunda pregunta: ¿qué es más macho? Light bulb o school bus?
Light bulb.
No, lo siento, school bus es más macho que light bulb. Gracias, and we'll be back in un momento. Well, I had a dream, and in it I went to a little town, and all the girls in town were named Betty, and they were singing.
I had a lot of fun on drum machines recently, and it's been very fascinating because I don't quite know what I'm doing, and the machines know it too. They just respond in such a quirky way. So a lot of these patterns are just kind of unrepeatable. Once I get them in the machine, it's very hard to reconstruct them because they're in many odd kinds of beats. I'm not so interested in rhythm as a timekeeper, as a dum, but more as something that you can weave parts in and out of, and a rhythm that's complex enough to be sustained throughout a whole song. For example, in Smoke Rings, it's the same pattern over and over. One of the things I've been trying to do is run that into keyboard lines as well, because one of the things I find fascinating about Cuban music is that the actual rhythm section is almost nothing. It's clave and maybe one or two drum hits. The real rhythm is in the keyboard lines, which are insane. And I love that music so much. Downs are on up beats, and it's just endlessly fascinating to me. So, because then you get the advantage, of course, of having a melodic rhythm line. So the songs that I've been working on since then have used that as a jumping off point.
I come very briefly to this place. I watch it move. I watch it shake. They say the dead will rise again. And here they come now, strange animals out of the ice age. And they stare at you, dumbfounded, like big mistakes. And we say, keep cool. Maybe if we pretend this never happened, they'll all just go away. What does she want? So call me, what does she want? I saw you, I told you, told you, can't go nowhere. Go tell me, what does she know? Sakimi, what does she know? And yes.
A lot of the images in the film are about language. Take a section like How to Write. What you see is a film animation of 6 objects slowly turning into their Japanese kanji, or ideogram, or word. Things actually that I got out of a book on the formation of the Japanese language. So how did the idea of horse turn into that word horse? So there are 6 objects: a horse and a hand and an eye and a fish and a bird and a mouth. Now, 2 performers, Adrian Ballou and David Van Tighem, are seated on a beam in front of this projection, and they are playing instruments. I should say, first of all, the idea behind this was a Japanese silent film. Now, in the silent films in the West, we had the piano player who's banging away, just commenting on the action, I suppose. But in Japan, the silent movies were accompanied by 6 guys kneeling in front of the film, looking at the film out of the corner of their eyes, which is behind them. They have little wood blocks, and they're doing all the sound effects and all the, doors opening, closing. It's a real Three Stooges kind of thing. It's just a lovely thing. Those images are so powerful for me, that of someone doing live sound in front of a silent image. It's really is how I began making film, which I did before I started to do music. I was working in 8mm, and I'd never have time to really finish a soundtrack. So I'd do the film, put it together, and then I'd show up at the film festival, which was somewhere in downtown New York, and I go, oh, soundtrack. So I'd stand in front of it and talk, tell stories, and play the violin. That's how I got into this thing. One of the things that I most enjoyed about directing this picture is being able to stand back and watch people come up with stuff, because I really wanted to be that kind of director, not someone who's going, you do this, you do that, you did that wrong, because I'm not really sure what's right. I design these things so they really are split-second collaborations of picture, sound, and image, but unless there's room for performers to feel their way around in this, it won't have life. So there was this series of animations that they did trade-offs on, so that David took the horse and Adrian took the hand, but they both commented on each other's playing as well. It was a duet. And all I said was, you interpret bird. So Adrian goes into the kitchen of our rehearsal space and pulls out a bunch of kitchen, spatulas and stuff. And he was kind of desperate looking for things. And his interpretation of bird was this wonderful thing with couple of barbecue tongs and just snapping them like little, and hopping like some little baby bird that really couldn't get off the ground. This is his idea of flight. I can't get up. Just hopping and hopping. And David's interpretation of bird in flight, extremely elegant cubist version of a piece of wood and a stick, and he's tapping the wood with the stick, and then the piece of wood goes up, higher behind him. Cubist bird in flight. I mean, watching these guys come up with that it was really exciting. And I should say, too, that this wasn't a band. This was a group of guest artists, all of whom have their own styles, their own bands. They all write music. It was a real privilege to work with these people.
It's life, what it's like. I turn around. It's here. I turn around again. And it's like nobody knows me. Nobody knows my name. Deep in the heart, darkest America, home of the brave. Ha ha ha! I've already paid for this. Listen to my heartbeat. And the little girls sing, leave the slow down. On the edge of the lake, they sing, he's Mr. Heartbreak.
There was a reconstruction of Oskar Schlemmer's work. He was a Bauhaus designer, and their dances of these odd characters in masks, these architectural dances that have just been recently reconstructed in New York by a woman named Deborah McCall. They're very lovely. They're dances about architecture, and one of my favorite quotes from Steve Martin is, "Talking about music is like dancing about architecture." Now, I thought that was impossible until I saw this Oskar Schlemmer dance. You'd see someone in a red, completely red, almost robotic sort of costume come out, and someone in yellow and someone in blue. These three primary robots, really, but very pudgy and soft. They were sort of stuffed. They were very lovable, and they move cubes and rectangles and pyramids around. Now, that doesn't sound too fascinating, but it was so... It looked like it had been made yesterday. This is Bauhaus in the 30s. Now, at this reconstruction of this work, there was a guy who showed up to make the introduction to it. Andreas Weininger, 95 years old, played trombone in the Bauhaus band. This guy shows up and he goes, "Good evening. I'm from the 19th century. And, in the 19th century, we had Saturday nights also. This was on a Saturday night. And let me tell you what we did." And he started describing these completely wild Bauhaus performances. I mean, they were really insane sounding. They made performance art of the 70s and 80s seem like really old hat. It's amazing how quickly you can forget where you're coming from and what your history is and how you fit into it, the development of ideas and of art and music. And especially in something like performance art, which is not something that ever goes into rep. It's not like dance even. It's easy enough to forget the intensity of, or at least what we hear about the intensity of Isadora Duncan or something, because she disappeared. And there is no Isadora Duncan with her scarves. Now, you can't reconstruct that. You cannot. So it was so amazing to see something from the past before your eyes. It was one of the most striking things I've ever seen. So the whole intro to this film is people in masks that are really completely inspired by Oskar Schlemmer's work. So I'd like to finally say that this film really is dedicated to the memory of Oskar Schlemmer and to his work and to its power and strangeness.